Coogs House, the Houston Cougars set to have one of the best defenses in the Big 12 and college football next fall with spring game kicking off this Saturday. So why did everyone spend Wednesday focused on a former Coug?
You are Locked On Coogs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On Coogs, daily podcast about your Houston Cougars. I'm your host, Houston-born teacher and coach Parker Ainsworth. And whether you're a Houston fan or just a hater who came to stop by, thank you for making Locked On Coogs your first listen of the day. We should make this first listen each and every day here at Locked On Coogs. If you enjoy the conversation, but you don't know what to say, tell us in the comments down below what your favorite type of chocolate is. Because today we're talking about a guy named Hershey quite a lot. Now, today's show is brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. We got more on that fun later. We're talking about the defense in this episode, specifically what the new defense could look like or looking for this weekend out of that new defense. If this is the best secondary in the Big 12, America, more. We'll talk about that. But first and foremost, thing we got to get into in the first segment is the conversation around potentially returning, or at least asking where is he going, about former Houston Cougar Hershey McLaurin. Now, you remember Hershey played last season, the Houston Cougars, and was a really, really good hybrid safety type. Played a very specific role in that. It was really, really good at it, I think, by both the eye test and the analytical metrics. Hershey initially declared for the NFL draft. And then ultimately, after he was out of eligibility, so he thought, but then the NCAA passed a ruling saying that actually those junior college years will no longer count against your Division I earning potential, your Division I eligibility years. Suddenly, Hershey had a year of eligibility left, and he took his name out of the NFL draft and said he's going to return to college, but was pretty much forced immediately to put his name into the transfer portal because in that whole interim, Houston had gone off and made some moves as if he was not returning. And this is kind of the casualty of timing of the whole thing. But in that small window, while Hershey McLaurin was in the NFL draft, or at least had his name in the NFL draft, Houston with assistant coach Zach Etheridge running the DBs at the time, actually went out and got Keontae Scott, who had a great couple of years at Auburn, had a down year in 2024, but some great years in 2022 and 2023 at that hybrid safety type and a little bit different style of defense, doing a little bit different job there. Than Houston had theirs doing 2024. And Houston felt like they had their hybrid type guy. Hershey McLaurin has just 1 year of eligibility, and like so many of these young men, has the ultimate goal of making it to the NFL as far as his individual goal goes. He can't go somewhere and potentially split reps or be a backup. And so he threw his name in the transfer portal. And then on Wednesday, he decided to tweet this. The announcement that he entered the transfer portal retweeted that announcement with a waking up emoji. And so people started going a little bananas. I talked to Mountaineer Paul a little bit on Twitter. He feels like there's a chance that Hershey McLaurin may go back to West Virginia. Remember, he transferred from West Virginia to Houston after having played those junior college years at the front end of his college career. And I think people started wondering, does that mean Hershey may come back to Houston? Hershey was really stinking good in the defense in 2024. The defense asked him to be more of a hybrid big body type, more in the box, more playing physical, more being for lack of a better phrase, like a hockey goon kind of guy in there. And he was really good at that. The truth is, though, that this defense will be different. New defense coordinator Austin Armstrong runs a different defense. And so you're looking at what kinds of body types you're looking for. Keontae Scott, who they pulled in with Zach Etheridge, or Zach Etheridge pulled in. We'll get to that part in a second. Keontae Scott kind of fits the mold of this more coverage type of guy that Houston is leaning into in that spot, or at least it stands to reason Houston will be, because Austin Armstrong has used that position in that way in the past at Florida and Southern Miss. And so it felt kind of like initially like you don't need Hershey. But then suddenly, kind of surprise to many people, Zach Etheridge left Houston for the University of Miami. Yes, the same Zach Etheridge that's the assistant coach, and perhaps more weirdly, the same Zach Etheridge that is the son-in-law of head coach Willie Fritz. But Miami is going to pay him a lot of money. He's not a dumb guy. He takes that money to go to the University of Miami. And everyone started wondering about what that meant for Keontae Scott, which makes this tweet from Hershey even more interesting because I think there's a lot of people that correctly, myself included, tied Keontae Scott and his time at Houston to Zach Etheridge. Etheridge was kind of known as a Keontae Scott whisperer at Auburn. He had great years under Etheridge in 2022 and 2023, playing that slot corner, playing inside, playing an interior defensive back. And then in 2024, Etheridge came to Houston, and Keontae Scott regressed. Now his numbers regressed. He's also asked to do a lot of different things. And so I think that a big piece of that was like he was trying to find his last year of eligibility at a spot where he could play with a guy that he knew he'd been successful under in Zach Etheridge. I don't think that part's ever changed. It would not surprise me if come Monday after the spring game, you saw Keontae Scott enter the portal and very quickly portal to Miami to play for Zach Etheridge. They've got great NIL packages there, etc. I don't know the Miami roster. I know Locked On Canes, Alex Donna will, but I do think that stands to reason. So again, back to this McLaurin tweet, I think people were assuming in reading tea leaves and had kind of already written Keontae Scott off the roster that, that may mean that McLaurin, who has been in the transfer portal window in limbo since January, right? That may mean that McLaurin is coming back to the Houston Cougars. And I have to say, frankly, from a personal level, I would welcome that in every way possible. He's a tremendous football player, was an important part of one of the best defenses, certainly one of the most underrated defenses in all of college football last year, in the Houston Cougars, top 30 in most analytical categories, and was on the field for so much of the game because of how bad the offense was last year. I feel like a lot of people have their eye on Hershey McLaurin and have their eye on what that spot's going to be, to which I want to bring up one more. Rayshawn Pleasant. I'll talk more about the fit there in a second, but Pleasant has played a couple years at Tulane. Yes, the same Tulane that Willie Fritz came from. He is officially in the transfer portal, had 35 tackles and a pick last season, and is, frankly, another great fit for this defense. We're going to talk about that secondary, what could fit where, etc., all in just a second. But before we get too far, today's show is, as I opened up with, brought to you by FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, and the NBA playoffs are on the corner. They're coming around the bend, coming towards your house, my house, and hitting our cell phones at FanDuel. And FanDuel is giving new customers an incredible way to get in on the action right now. When you join FanDuel and place your first $5 bet, you can get $250 in bonus bets if that bet hits. I love how easy FanDuel is. I love how many different stats I can put those $5 down on. I love how many I can get player props I can find in the big games like playoff games and so on. Even after the game tips, you get same game parlays, live action on FanDuel. You can't miss out on this. Head to FanDuel.com and claim your $250 back in bonus bets today. Parker Ainsworth, Locked On Coogs here, talking about Houston, the defense, the secondary specifically, and some transfer portal questions as things go on here. Now, you're seeing a lot of names in the transfer portal this week as different programs are wrapping up spring practice, having exit interviews, and so on. You're also seeing a lot of people, guys that had great springs want to move up in the world, guys that had bad springs want to move somewhere they can play in the world. You have the Yamalama the Nico at Tennessee, right? You have all kinds of chaos around all kinds of things here. But the secondary at Houston continues to look strong. I think right now, if I were a betting man, I'd put money on at FanDuel, if it were available. I would look at, does Keontae Scott return to Houston next fall after a great spring? I think he will. I think his skill set fits what Armstrong wants that hybrid guy to do in the secondary really, really well. I also think he's a high-end performer. And as much as Etheridge was kind of a Keontae Scott whisperer, JCY is a great secondary coach as well. Is going to kind of take over a bigger role in Etheridge's absence. And I don't think they're going to skip a beat in a whole lot of that. Now, you cannot completely replace the relationship. I totally get that. But at this point, it's like if he's going to leave and have basically missed a whole spring, is he going to get to Miami and be behind the guys there and that kind of stuff? We'll see. That said, I would keep my eyes on, if they need to replace him and they look externally, Rayshon Pleasant and not Hershey McLaurin. And here's why. I think Hershey McLaurin is really, really good. I mentioned he's super physical, but what Houston wants out of this guy is a lot more of a coverage kind of guy. He does a lot more coverage kind of things than they did a year ago at that spot. So I think Rayshon Pleasant is the way to go. And so whatever the case may be, that fifth DB will be the fifth DB and what I'm currently projecting to be the best secondary in the Big 12. Hear me out here. I'm really, really high on this group of guys. First of all, you're returning All-American in multiple different publications and A.J. Haulcy at safety. This dude is a 1994, 2003 hard-hitting, hard-nosed, heavy shoulder pads kind of safety. All Big 12 a year ago. First team, led the Big 12 in picks. Houston's, frankly, really lucky Haulcy didn't go pro. He transferred to Houston from New Mexico a couple years back. And man, oh man, talk about a guy that was ready for the Power 5 when he showed up. Now it's obviously the Power 4, but Haulcy's the real freaking deal. I can see him being in the running to win national type of awards. Haulcy's really good. And frankly, for what Armstrong wants to do with the down safety, not the hybrid safety, but the down safety, he might legitimately force a lot of turnovers just by being a physical presence inside, really like A.J. Haulcy. Behind him, the other safety, Kentrell Webb, comes back. He had a great year last year. Frankly, I think could get freed up some and more of the free safety kind of stuff this year. We'll see how he fits in on Saturday in the spring game, but I'm high on Kentrell Webb. Thought Kentrell Webb had a really good year a year ago. Jeremiah Wilson at the other corner kind of unlocks this whole thing, and I'm projecting a big year out of Jeremiah Wilson, I'm being really honest. Another year getting bigger, stronger, faster, a defense that puts a lot more on his plate and allows him to be the athlete he is, read, react, and do those kinds of things. Jeremiah Wilson was the Pro Football Focus number 8 returning corner in all of college football. He ended last season with the 6th best grade of all of the cornerbacks on Pro Football Focus in the Power 4. He did briefly enter the portal in December and ultimately decided to come back once the defense coordinator drama had kind of gotten settled down and Austin Armstrong was coming in. And I think that signifies to me that he liked the direction Houston was going in. He could have left then if he wanted to for the big payday. I think he's got a system that he understands will feature him in a way that gets him to the next level. Jeremiah Wilson, though, is a true bona fide, will play on Sundays kind of corner, and Houston's really lucky to have him. So let's pay attention to what that guy's doing. He's the kind of corner that, based on what they're doing this fall, he might not rack up all the stats that you think about because his guy won't be open enough to throw it to him, right? He's going to have that kind of a year. And then that means that Latrell McCutcheon on the other side will actually get kind of the benefit of playing alongside Jeremiah Wilson. Latrell McCutcheon would be a lot of teams' number 1 corner. Houston just also has Jeremiah, right? And Latrell is long. He is quick. He is good in the hips. I'm anticipating another big year in McCutcheon. And so suddenly you've got 4 pieces of a tremendous secondary, and I really just kind of focus on what the name of that 5th will be. Again, presently looks like Keontae Scott. Could talk me into it being Rayshon Pleasant. Could talk me into it being Hershey McLaurin. Even I liked Hershey a lot. What I wonder is if it's neither of those guys, but someone currently on the roster that just transferred in December as well. Mark Stampley is a guy that hear his name mentioned a lot. Safety from Georgia Southern. He played some corner, played some interior defensive back and stuff like that while at Georgia Southern. Kind of feels like a Swiss Army knife when you read his resume. 3 picks a year ago, forced a fumble, had a turnover forced a year prior as well. Upperclassman, veteran kind of college football player that I think will make an impact here. Georgia Southern doesn't produce the same kind of athletes as a Power 4 school does typically. I think Stampley fits in, and I think that's significant for his development as a Houston Cougar. On kind of the inverse of that, Jordan Allen's a guy who you hear about being a tremendous athlete in the Houston Cougars system. Could definitely see him making an impact. He played a lot of free safety out at LSU. When he got to play, he didn't play a whole lot, if I'm being frank with you. And so kind of the inverse of Mark Stampley, who is like trying to demonstrate he's the kind of athlete that can play at this level, but has the background to back it up. Jordan Allen, we know, is the right kind of athlete. It's but can he show the on-field stuff, the video stuff to earn the spot? I could also see a world where Jordan Allen plays like the free safety and you move Kentrell Webb up as that coverage interior guy. So we'll see there. Will James, guy people are really high on, went to Auburn out of high school, started every game at Southern Miss last year, like a really good tackling corner that actually did better in his Pro Football Focus grades against better competition, which I think indicates being ready for the Power 4. I'm high on Mo Williams. You remember Mo Williams was a big-time recruit Houston brought in a few years ago at safety. Kind of one of those guys that really wanted to make sure a Houston kid stayed in Houston. And I think that he's a name to keep an eye on here as well. This 5th spot is not, I don't want to make it sound up for grabs because I think if Keontae stays, it is his to have. I will say, though, that whether it's Keontae Scott or someone else, there are going to be people from the Houston secondary hitting the portal come Monday, Tuesday after the spring game is over. And that's not an indictment on JCY. That's not an indictment on Austin Armstrong. That's not an indictment on anything. Guys are trying to find places they can get on the field, right? Ultimately, that's important for their NIL dollars, for their video for going pro, for all kinds of things, right? And so what you're going to see is guys that are not happy with their role in game situations, their reps, what their divide is, etc., on Saturday, or who just finally are out of spring ball and didn't like it the whole time, maybe even hitting the transfer portal. They're also going to have exit interviews on the way out after spring practice, and that's when you're going to hear coaches being pretty honest with guys with, hey, here's where we see you fitting in. And if guys don't like the way they, quote, fit in or whatever, they will also probably hit the portal. You're going to see an exodus just like you saw out of so many programs in the last 10 days in the next few after the spring game. And that's not an abnormal kind of thing or some indictment on the program or Armstrong and the defense or whatever. It's frankly kind of looks like it's going to happen because there's a logjam of talent at some of these spots. And so I want to see where those guys go, where those names go. Again, I think Keontae Scott's the 5th starter, but I'm like everyone else and assuming he is going to really seriously take a look at following Etheridge to Miami. He came to Houston to play for Etheridge after all. I would really like it if he didn't do that, if I'm being really honest. I think him at that interior kind of nickel, kind of down safety, kind of et cetera spot, man, that's a really good secondary all of a sudden, right? Power 4 kind of talent, future NFL guys kind of talent in multiple spots. Just tremendous upside in that group. And so as the defense starts to look different, I think that should be kind of where we wrap today. So I want to jump in all that in just a second. Parker Angel, Locked On Coogs here, talking about Houston's defense moving into the spring game, moving into year 2 of Willie Fritz, moving into year 3 of the Big 12, moving into year 1 of Austin Armstrong. And Houston was top 40 in like every category, top 30 in most analytical categories in terms of total defense and things like that a year ago. Yes, as far as starters go, you've got to replace Keith Cooper, who I would argue was tremendous as far as like guys you've got to find ways to get the same kind of production from, right? The way he bent the offensive line as a pass rusher cannot be understated, overstated. It's important. You're hoping for LaTravion McCutcheon to come in and play a lot of really significant snaps and play them really well at that like dog type of position. You're looking for that fifth DB because while this defense is multiple in coverages and multiple in how they get there, they typically have 4 pass rushers of various position types and 2 coverage backers of various sizes and position types, and typically 5 different kinds of defensive backs line up in a bunch of different looks. It's a complex defense, I think, in terms of like reading it as an offense, but it will always shake out to some version of a 4-2-5, just who goes where on the snap, right? And so you do need to have 5 starting caliber defensive backs, and it's who those 5 are. I think 4 are pretty locked down, but we'll see on Saturday what they look like. You also kind of need to know where those passers are going to be and things like that. And I think what's fascinating when looking at this defense, and this is more, hypothetical till they play, I guess. I think this defense has a chance to be better than a year ago, even though a year ago was probably one of the most underrated in America because of it playing alongside a more competent offense, Slade Nagel being a more prolific offensive coordinator, Connor Wegman being a successful quarterback, Rayshon Sanford, slew of receivers, new offensive linemen, you name it. The offense got better at it in the offseason, right? This defense, when you're playing against teams that are not just trying to waste the clock, are not up by a couple touchdowns already, etc., this defense is going to look ridiculous. And I think it's kind of the wake-up call for the rest of the country about the sleeping giant that Houston can be. I'm not the kind of guy that's going to be like national title for next year. That's going to happen or whatever. I think they have a chance to be really good. I think they're, like we saw last year, games they're going to win that are going to surprise people. Last year that was Kansas State. And I think it's to some degree Utah as well. They're also still early on in this rebuilding process, so they'll probably have a couple boneheaded games. You hope you can get out of those 2 unscathed, but likelihood of that happening is hard to see. And so I say that to say that across the board here, this is a defensive-minded football team that's going to carry Houston pretty far, I'd imagine. The schedule is more favorable next year than it was last year. You got some very winnable non-conference games. You got a favorable conference draw. Ultimately, I've got my qualms with a couple Friday night games. They've got the Big 12 trying to occupy that TV slot, but ultimately the schedule I think came out pretty strong for Houston in terms of being a great year to continue this rebuild and see some positive momentum. That rests heavily on this defense, and I anticipate this defense being one of the best in the Big 12. I frankly think that's in large part because of the secondary. Secondary's got a couple pros in it, I think. I have gotten this far in the episode, talking about the defense, talking about the secondary, etc., without mentioning Corey Platt Jr., and that feels like a sin and a shame because even the secondary is going to benefit from that guy coming back from the ACL injury. Folks that may not remember, he was a high-end, looked like a future pro at Tulane, playing linebacker, transferred to Houston with Keith Cooper and Willie Fritz when they came over, and then ultimately tore his ACL and never got to see the field last year. Keith Cooper is, assuming he's made 100% recovery, an NFL kind of linebacker. He might play more like the Will at the NFL level, just from a size standpoint. He's a good coverage guy for a linebacker, etc. But the dude's a true linebacker in college football, and he's really, really good. And so he's going to help this coverage as well as being the whole coverage man and forcing pass rushing and, frankly, and being the quarterback of the defense, kind of taking some of that pressure off of Haulcy. but also kind of helping get guys in the right spots that are all cohesive, but playing in a new defense. I'm pretty high on this defense, if you can't tell, going into next year. I got some high expectations of the offense too. There's a lot more question marks on that side of the ball with fitting pieces together. Fitting pieces together is also really important for an offense, whereas defense goes like, well, we got a better safety, we got a better corner, we got a better pass rush. Like we can just kind of check those off. They can almost function almost like baseball players playing an individual, but also team sport in a lot of ways. Especially if they get into some of the man high kind of stuff you see out of Austin Armstrong when he was at Florida. And so I think that's something to keep an eye on for this weekend. Now, heads up, I'm going to keep talking unless something big comes up in the basketball world or whatever. We're going to continue to preview the spring game this weekend throughout the rest of our episodes this week. It is also Easter weekend for those who celebrate. So recording maybe even Friday, going into Friday, maybe a little challenging. Recording over the weekend with it being Easter Sunday and seeing family on Saturday and Sunday and those kinds of things may make Monday a little wonky and awkward, but we're paying attention to Houston Cougar football. We're getting back in gear for Willie Fritz year 2. The Coogs are back. This is going to be a fun season to be a Houston Cougar fan. If you did not get in on the culture last year, this is kind of the last time before it feels really bandwagony. And trust me, it's going to get to where it feels really bandwagony. So you want to get on now while you can. Man. All right. So we're going to try and continue to preview this going into Saturday. Coming out of the weekend, we're going to talk about reviewing it, going back and seeing it a couple times, and continue to try and talk to more people close to the program, get more of a vibe on how things are going. And as I said, there will likely be transfer portal guys next week after the game is over. We're going to break down those entrances and exoduses as well. Do all those kinds of things, plus whatever the latest basketball news is. You'll also know I have a soft spot for the women's basketball program. I love more basketball all the time. So as more news comes out on that, we'll talk about that as well. All things Houston Cougars here each and every day at Locked on Coogs, with some exceptions for a holiday weekend. Hit subscribe, hit the bell so you know we're live. Locked on Coogs is a proud member of the Locked On Podcast Network. That means your team, the Houston Cougars, each and every day. Go Coogs.